Okay, welcome everybody to our afternoon session. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. We are going to get started with our public hearing, and I'd like to give everybody an idea of how this is going to go. I'll have our CAO introduce county staff, and then we will move on and give the applicant and the appellant, the applicant first, 10 minutes to present, and then we will give the opportunity to the appellant to present. So each of them will get 10 minutes. And then we will open it up for public comment, and that'll be 3 minutes. Our usual 3 minutes will be for each person that comes up for public comment. At the end of the public hearing, we will be allowing a rebuttal, and that'll be the final comments, and that will be 5 minutes for the applicant, and then at the very end, 5 minutes for the appellant. So that is the way our public hearing will proceed. So I'll turn it over to our CAO to introduce county staff.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we have our afternoon session to be held now at 1:30 p.m. We have our interim planning director, Byron Turner, here. Basically, the topic of conversation is to hold a public hearing regarding the appeals of Planning Commission's approval of use permit 1023-09-A, approval of revised Pinoche Valley Solar Project. So, Byron.
Thank you, Ray. Again, Byron Turner with Planning. I'm also here with Susan Lee of Aspen Environmental. They're the preparers of the environmental document. So I'm going to give a brief introduction of the project and the process and where we've been before I turn it over to Susan to talk about the project and the environmental document. So some milestones where we've been. The amended CUP application came in August of 2014. We had scoping meetings, and then the draft environmental document was released in December. We had the public hearing on the environmental document in January of 2015. The final document was released April 3rd, 2015, and then this item was heard by the Planning Commission on April 25th, 2015, where it was approved. So there it is in flowchart form, and then today on appeal, we are before the Board of Supervisors. So the process that we went through, it began with preparing the draft supplemental environmental impact report. Then we respond to the comments on the draft supplemental environmental impact report, prepare the final. That's when we went to the Planning Commission public hearing to certify the environmental impact report and approve the conditional use permit. That, again, was appealed to the Board of Supervisors where we are today, that certification and the amended use permit. So now I'm going to turn it over to Susan to talk about the project itself.
Thank you, Byron. This first slide is a little bit of history. We wanted to kind of orient you to what has happened since 2010 when we were here, when this project was approved for the first time. You'll see on this slide 3 colors of hatching. The blue, which is the largest outline, is the project that was initially proposed in 2010. The yellow, which is the next smallest outline on here, is the project that was approved in 2010. So it became quite a bit smaller between the proposed and the approved project. The red, which is smaller yet, is the project that was resubmitted to the county for an amended conditional use permit in the end of, or last August. So the project we're looking at now is about 1,500 acres smaller. It still comes with the same conservation lands, and this slide here, and the colors are all kind of pastels, but there are 3 very large parcels of conservation land that will be put into conservation permanently associated with this project. The first one is the Valley Floor Conservation Lands, which essentially is the piece of land that originally was proposed to be developed for the solar project, but now isn't because the project is condensed. The second one is the Valadeo Ranch Conservation Lands, basically everything to the north of the project in this light blue. And the third one is the Silver Creek Ranch, the very large parcel to the lower right on here. There are 2 reasons we prepared the supplemental environmental impact report. The first one was to look at the revised project itself and some proposed changes to mitigation measures. The second one was to incorporate impact analysis of PG&E's proposed upgrades that are required in order for PG&E to carry the electricity for this project. These upgrades relate entirely to telecommunications, not to the electrical part of PG&E's service. So the two components that we looked at of PG&E's service included a new optical ground wire, which is the communications part of the system that runs along the very top of each transmission tower. And the second is a backup system of microwave communications, because PG&E requires a redundant communication system, since that's essential to their system. This first slide shows the location of the 4 microwave towers. The microwave has to travel in a straight line path, so it doesn't look straight here, but you can see the little dashed line that connects each one of these sites. On 2 of the 4 sites, at Pinoche Mountain and Call Mountain, the PG&E's microwave facility would be installed on existing towers that are already there. In the other 2 sites, one out in the Central Valley and at the Helm substation, and one at the solar field itself, a new microwave tower would be constructed. This map shows the locations of the optical ground wire system. It starts at the Pinoche substation on the upper right corner where the pink box is, and follows the sort of turquoise line all the way into the switchyard, which would be located within the solar project boundary itself. The towers there, the transmission towers, are not being affected. The new wire is attached to the existing towers, except in this one small area where there's an inset where only existing wood poles would be replaced with new wood poles in the exact same locations, just that they need to carry a little more weight. These next slides I'll go through pretty quickly. This is just the standard EIR list of issues, and we covered every one of them in both the original and the supplemental EIR. And again, the standards of impact significance that we used in the supplemental EIR and also in the 2010 EIR. The conclusions of the supplemental EIR were ultimately exactly the same levels of impact significance that were found in 2010. The same significant impacts were found in visual resources and noise. A very large number of impacts that would have been significant except for the implementation of mitigation measures. A number of 24 impacts that are less than significant to begin with and didn't require mitigation, and several beneficial impacts. The impacts that remain significant that required the statement of overriding considerations that the Planning Commission has already addressed are aesthetics. It is both the construction and operation are fairly substantial changes from what is in the valley at this point, and the concern about construction noise, because it's a quiet location, the incremental increase of noise definitely would be noticeable, but again, short term. The area of impacts that has been the most severe and the most of concern to the community and the resource agencies has been biological resources. And this is the area that drove the need for the 25,000 acres of mitigation land, which is a huge mitigation ratio, basically, for a project of this size. There are some species of that are very much of concern: San Joaquin kit fox, the leopard lizard, and giant kangaroo rat. But again, with 24,000 acres of mitigation lands, our biology team, and we have Daniel Duke here representing H.T. Harvey if anyone has questions, found that those impacts were mitigated to less than significant levels, combined with a very substantial list of mitigation measures that require pre-construction, during construction, post-construction requirements. The other impacts that would be of concern, because this project has a more condensed construction period into 18 months, previously it would have been spread over 5 years, is traffic and water resources. The number of vehicles, as many as 500 vehicles of workers commuting to the site on one day at the peak of construction, required some mitigation that we sat down with the county sheriff and the CHP officers from both Gilroy and Los Banos to develop and hear their input on what we could do to ensure traffic safety with that number of vehicles. So there's a mitigation measure that was added to the supplemental EIR to ensure traffic safety. and the concern about groundwater. There will be a fair amount of groundwater withdrawn for dust control during construction. We already had a mitigation measure to control and evaluate the amount of groundwater withdrawal. That measure was tightened up given the faster rate of and more condensed time frame on groundwater resources. Both of these resulted in impacts less than significant with those mitigation measures. Similarly, the PG&E upgrades, in the context of the project itself, these upgrades are very minor. They're really not even going to be visible except for the 2 new microwave towers, the addition of 1 wire to a transmission facility that already has much larger conductors on it. They're not good. I think the general public won't see them. There is some construction impacts. Some helicopters will be used, but it's a very short-term, matter of weeks construction period. We published the draft SEIR in just before Christmas. Got a lot of comments. We wrote responses to all the comments. They're presented in the final SEIR. The things that changed in between the draft and the final were, one was a couple were changes actually by PG&E. One is that they were able to eliminate the possibility of a new microwave tower at Pinocha Mountain, and they provided some air quality calculations. The revised solar project, as I mentioned, we added some traffic safety measures and a number of new technical appendices, which are all on the county's website. We also, a number of biological resources information was added or expanded in between the draft and the final. And then, in addition to that, in the past few weeks, we have published 3 errata to the final SEIR. Each of these is defining a specific, basically fairly minor change that we just wanted to get into the record. The first one was just because in our printing process, we omitted to present one comment letter. One of them addressed some minor acreage changes to drainage features between 7.9 and 8.5 acres, pretty small numbers. And the last one was to incorporate a newer version of rare plant studies. All 3 of these we've looked at to make sure they didn't affect the severity of impacts or any mitigation measures that have already been recommended. So, turn it back to Byron.
So the board's action today, then, is to review and consider the Planning Commission's April 25th, 2015 certification of the SEIR, as well as all written and oral comments received, and consider whether to uphold the Planning Commission's certification of the final SEIR and uphold the Planning Commission's approval of an amended conditional use permit application. So your staff's recommended actions today, then, are number 1, to conduct a public hearing on the appeals, number 2, to consider the evidence submitted to the board, and number 3, deny the appeals filed on behalf of the applicants, deny the appeals filed on behalf of appellants and uphold the decision of the Planning Commission. And suggested motion is to adopt the resolution certifying the final supplemental environmental impact report and adopting findings of fact, a mitigation, monitoring, and reporting program, and statement of overriding considerations for the revised Pinocha Valley Solar Project, which is attachment 1 to your staff report, and to adopt the resolution denying the appeals and upholding the Planning Commission's decision, which is attachment 2 to the staff report. The applicant team is here as our representatives of the appellants. We have 2 appellants. Their appeals and the county's response to the appeals are located in your packet. So with that concludes staff's presentation. And so I believe if there's no questions, I believe the next step was the applicant, give the applicant the ability to speak.
Yes, and what I'll do at this time is I'll officially open the public hearing. And now that staff has made their report, and I will invite the applicant to come up at this time and present to the Board of Supervisors.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, Supervisors. My name is John Pimentel. I'm the CEO of Pinocha Valley Solar, and it's good to be back again. This has become a familiar place here over the last 6 years. I really want to just hold my comments to 3 general areas. The first is the environmental benefits created by this project. The second are the economic benefits supported by this project. And the third is the process by which we've gone through to come to today's action. As far as the environmental benefits are concerned, these are all things that you all have studied before and we've said before, but just to revisit them. This project will generate 247 megawatts of 100% renewable energy. That's enough to fuel the operation of 68,000 California households. It's in terms of its carbon benefit, it's the equivalent of burning 530 million pounds of coal annually. And in terms of helping the environment, it's the equivalent of planting over 400,000 acres of trees in a forest situation for a mature forest. It has that kind of impact in terms of carbon in our environment. We've also gone to extreme lengths to study the impacts of the project and understand it. You'll if you're interested, can hear from our biologists who've been on the public record, who will talk about how this project is actually a net benefit for the species, given the amount of effort that's gone into redesigning the project, reducing its footprint, and of course creating the massive mitigation outcome and conservation benefit. We are literally going to be purchasing through this project almost 40 square miles of land, private land, which will be converted into the public trust for the perpetual benefit of the species. So while the project will have some impacts, those mitigations, redesign efforts, and of course the conservation land will end up with a net benefit. That's endorsed as well by a group called the Conservation Fund, who's made their mission in their 30-year history to go out and actually look for opportunities like this where projects can be pushed to make maximal efforts to create conservation outcomes that are beneficial for the environment. From an economic perspective, this project will cost $650 million, which will be invested in this county, a massive investment that will generate 500 direct construction jobs and the overall creation of 1,000 jobs, over 1,000 jobs, direct and indirect, if you consider the overall economic impact. As far as the county's operations are concerned, the project will generate nearly $40 million in various sales and use taxes, which, to put in perspective, as you all know, given the troubles, the budget constraints that you've had to work with over the years, that's greater than your county general fund on an annual basis. So this is a major economic benefit for the county's operations as well, and the other critical services that you provide to your people. As far as the process is concerned, for the supervisors who've only had to enjoy this for the last couple of years, and those supervisors who've been able to enjoy the process for the last 5 or 6 years, you should know that as a developer, we've gone to extreme lengths to try to incorporate the input from the government agencies, from the biological experts, and from the third-party NGOs who've been willing to work with us. And we've, I think, done an admirable job of incorporating that. We've redesigned the project. It was originally approved by the county as an almost 400 megawatt project. We've taken that down to 240. We've reallocated the footprint to minimize its impact on the giant kangaroo rat. We will not be touching, pursuant to state law, any blunt-nosed leopard lizards. And the effect for the San Joaquin kit fox, given the beneficial aspects of the mitigation land, are that it's been described by experts as a useful and even critical component to the long-term restoration of the San Joaquin kit fox. That conversion of private land into the public trust is an important thing and something we're very proud of as an outcome of this project. So in the end, you'll hear from opponents that this is a special place, that we should try to preserve this land for the species. And in fact, we believe that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to take cattle ranching land, convert it into a higher and better economic use, and create an environmental benefit for the Panoche Valley and for the whole Searville-Panoche region that will help these key species persist in perpetuity. So with that, I appreciate your consideration. It's been a very long process. We're hopeful to get construction started late summer this year and continue through 2016, as you heard before. And we ask for your aye vote on this, well, I should say for your nay vote, in terms of the appeal. We appreciate your continued support for the project, And we're looking forward to getting started on the investment and the job creation shortly. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Jason Rederer, and I'm speaking on behalf of the project applicant. As many of you may know, I was involved, and I've been involved with the project since 2010, and I, along with County Council, successfully defended the board's approvals back in 2010. Today, you're going to hear claims that the SEIR is inadequate, that the studies are flawed, that more studies are required to fully understand the impacts, and that the extensive mitigation measures that are set forth in the SEIR are inadequate. And you'll recall that a lot of these same claims were made in 2010 that the court actually considered in 2010 and rejected. As you hear the various comments, just want you to keep in mind a couple of CEQA principles that are all laid out in the case law and the CEQA guidelines. One is that the purpose of the SEIR is not to reevaluate the environmental impacts of the original project. It's really to look at the incremental changes in this project, which John mentioned in terms of overall disturbance area. That has been reduced since 2010. Technical perfection is not required in an EIR. Good faith analysis is required in an EIR. And this SEIR contains, I think, 200 or 300 pages of good faith reasoned analysis. There's always going to be differences of opinion and disagreements with the conclusions of the EIR. But again, the courts say that that does not make an EIR inadequate. The issue is whether there is substantial evidence in the record to support the EIR's conclusions. And we believe that there is a significant amount of evidence in the record to support all the conclusions. The county also has very broad discretion to determine how environmental issues are addressed and analyzed in an EIR. Claims that impacts must be analyzed in a different way, or that other studies might shed some further light on a particular impact, again, doesn't mean that the EIR is inadequate. And an agency is not required to conduct every recommended test or study. As I stated before, we feel like there's a robust analysis already included in the EIR. Just because some studies might be helpful doesn't mean that everything that's been done to date is somehow flawed or inadequate. The county can absolutely rely upon the technical expertise and analysis and conclusions of its consultants who have worked on this SEIR. And there's no shortage of experts on the project. You've heard from a couple today. There was an extensive list of experts, about 17 different consultants with different technical experience and expertise that are listed in Section 8 of the SEIR. As it relates specifically to this project, again, the county has already approved a project that would result in environmental effects in 2010. This approval essentially becomes the baseline for purposes of analyzing this particular project. By reducing the size of the project from 399 megawatts to 247 megawatts and the overall disturbance area by approximately 700 acres, the applicant has incrementally reduced a lot of the environmental impacts that were disclosed in 2010 with respect to the original project. Nonetheless, the same comprehensive mitigation strategy that was laid out in 2010 now applies to the revised project and is included in the mitigation monitoring reporting program that's attached to your resolution. So every significant environmental impact of the revised project has been addressed in the findings of fact that are set forth in your resolution. I think there's about 120 pages of them if you're able to get through any of them. And those findings explain how most of these impacts will be reduced to a level of insignificance with the mitigation program that has been recommended by Aspen and the consultant team. So with that, I would request that you deny the appeals that are before you today. I also wanted to introduce two consultants for some quick comments. One of the consultants is Jim Finnegan with Kleinfelder. He's a project hydrogeologist who looked very closely at the potential groundwater impacts from this project, so I wanted him to just say a couple of words, and to the extent that there are questions from the board, he's a person that can answer those technical questions. And I'd also like to introduce Randy McCormick, who's one of the project biologists who's very familiar with this site. When I talked to Randy earlier today and asked her how much time she spent on the site in the last 6 years, she said 300 to 400 days, the equivalent of in terms of either herself or her team out surveying for environmental resources out there. So she, in terms of the biologist, she is very familiar with the baseline conditions out there and all the various species. So with that, I'd just like to turn it over to Jim Finnegan for some brief comments. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm just going to read a quick statement, and then if there are any questions. My name is Jim Finnegan. I'm a principal hydrogeologist with Kleinfelder. I have a bachelor's degree in geology. I have a PhD in hydrogeology, and I've been practicing as a hydrogeologist for approximately 25 years throughout the state of California. I have reviewed the reports and studies prepared by Geologica for the final supplemental environmental impact report, analysis of water resources impacts for the revised Panoche Valley Solar Project. I've also reviewed the various technical comments on the final SEIR that question the adequacy of these studies of the SEIR's analysis of groundwater impacts. Based on my professional judgment, the FEIR and FSEIR have adequately describe potential impacts of the project on groundwater supplies, and the proposed mitigation measures will ensure groundwater supplies are protected. This will include performing an additional pumping test, and final numerical modeling of the aquifer will follow on what Geologica did to confirm anticipated conditions described in the record, along with implementing of a monitoring program prior to and during construction that will provide data on the effect of groundwater extraction operations during construction on the aquifer system. These data will allow the applicant and the county to modify extraction operations to protect groundwater supplies as they're monitored and we determine what the impacts are.
Thank you.
So that's it. Are there any questions?
Questions from the board? Not at this time, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Maybe called up later.
All right.
Good afternoon. My name is Randy McCormick. I'm the owner of McCormick Biological. I'm a biologist with 28 years of experience in the San Joaquin Valley, the Coast Ranges, and the surrounding areas. My experience includes inventory and assessment of impacts to sensitive plant and animal species that occur in and around the Panoche region and the San Joaquin Valley. My teams have been participating on project surveys since 2009. We had 1 year when we were not out there, but other years I've had either teams or myself, I've been out on the project site. I've been part of the team reviewing and updating the biological reports and studies prepared for the project, as well as analyses included in the final supplemental environmental impact report for the revised Panoche Valley Solar Project. Based on my professional judgment, the FSEIR has described the potential impacts of the revised project on biological resources. Mitigation measures that are proposed will minimize and avoid impacts to sensitive species, habitat, and vegetation. The proposed mitigation strategy includes the development and implementation of several resource-specific management and protection plans in coordination with the Fish and Wildlife Service and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the county. The mitigation strategy requires that pre-construction surveys be conducted, avoidance and minimization measures be implemented, the relocation of species to sensitive species, to minimize direct mortality, and ongoing monitoring of construction activities by qualified biologists, and the permanent conservation of over 24,000 acres of land that will contribute to the recovery of many threatened and endangered species in the Panoche region. Thank you for your time.
Could you state your name again, please?
My name is Randy McCormick.
Randy, thank you. Any questions of Ms. McCormick? Okay, you may be asked to come up later. Thank you. Any others to speak on behalf of the applicant? Okay. I will now invite the appellant to present to the Board of Supervisors. If you could introduce
So there's
yourselves.
two appellants, Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
One is citizens for concerned citizens for Panoche Valley, and the other is the Audubon Society and the Sierra Club. So you might want to call them up one at a time so we know who's speaking for the record, which
Yes,
appellant.
please. If you could introduce yourself and tell us who you represent.
Sure. My name is Rachel Koss. I'm here on behalf of San Benito Residents for Responsible Development. Koss, K-O-S-S. We respectfully request that the board not approve the project and deny certification of the supplemental EIR pending recirculation of a revised supplemental EIR for the following reasons. First, the supplemental EIR removed a previously required mitigation measure for significant impacts to vernal pool fairy shrimp during project construction and operation without any legitimate reason supported by substantial evidence to do so. This mitigation measure, it's number 8.1, which was removed. It required full protocol level surveys of ephemeral pools for vernal pool fairy shrimp, which are, by the way, protected under state and federal law. The results of those surveys would then have been used to determine which pools would be protected under a different measure, measure 8.2. So 8.1 was removed, just as a reminder. The applicant conducted surveys shortly after the project was approved in 2010, and since then, the county removed that measure for the revised project, concluding that removing the measure would not create a new significant impact or substantially increase the severity of a biological impact. But this conclusion is not supported by substantial evidence. The record contains substantial evidence that, one, the location of vernal pools change frequently over time. Two, this threatened species frequently disperses to new locations. And three, the county knows that suitable habitat exists across the project site. But now the supplemental EIR protects only those pools where the species were found about 5 years ago, despite clear evidence that the location of the pools changed, that's in the record, and the species has likely moved. And in fact, the United States Fish and Wildlife Service stated specifically that they would no longer consider those previous surveys to be valid. Because the county eliminated that initial measure, 8.1, and now relies on outdated surveys, the county simply lacks substantial evidence to support its conclusion that impacts to vernal pool fairy shrimp will be reduced to less than significant. And instead, substantial evidence clearly shows the project will undoubtedly cause unmitigated impacts to this protected species. The county must require new surveys to determine the presence of the fairy shrimp through the reestablishment of that mitigation measure 8.1 and include this information in a revised supplemental EIR that is recirculated for comment. Second, the supplemental EIR is severely flawed with respect to its impact analysis for sensitive avian species. This same problem has been raised by state and federal resource agencies. The project area itself is an important refuge for rare avian species, and all potential impacts to migratory birds, which are protected under federal law, must be carefully considered and mitigated. Unfortunately, the county's mitigation scheme for avian species is inadequate. The supplemental EIR, it requires 1 year of post-construction mortality monitoring, and this precludes a successful adaptive management strategy. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service actually recommends a minimum of 3 years of post-construction monitoring, and other researchers who've studied this particular issue recommend at least 2 years of daily surveys. Very, very different from what's required in the supplemental EIR. In addition, there are thresholds for the thresholds for triggering even the county's inadequate adaptive management are unlawfully deferred to an unknown time. That means that there could be a high level of unmitigated take of migratory birds before the county even determines what level of take would require action. This is simply backwards. And there's no indication of what the county would consider a substantial amount of take. In addition, the supplemental EIR fails to provide an adequate list of potential measures that could be implemented once a future threshold is met. The EIR is vague. It merely states that the potential measures may include flight diverters, which could only lead to a small decrease in mortality, if any, and white borders, which is actually inconsistent with recommendations by those who are researching this very issue. The measures in the EIR, they're inadequate, they're unenforceable, they do not satisfy CEQA. Third, the supplemental EIR does not adequately analyze impacts to groundwater. The revised project increases the amount of water used for project construction. But the supplemental EIR fails to adequately analyze and mitigate the increase in water usage because it first grossly overestimates recharge, second, grossly underestimates drawdown, third, fails to consider that drawdown is exacerbated by the current historic drought, fourth, the EIR fails to provide clear and enforceable mitigation, and finally, the EIR completely fails to identify a true alternative water source and any environmental impacts associated with delivering the water from that alternative water source to the project. The EIR's mitigation for overpumping is vague and ineffective. The county says that the project will stop pumping local groundwater if it falls below a certain level in comparison to other off-site wells. But then, the county states that in the event of groundwater impacts, the alternative water source would be groundwater from another well in the same aquifer. That doesn't make any sense. How can pumping the same groundwater serve as an alternative water source? It can't. The supplemental EIR fails to identify a true alternative water source should the project be required to stop pumping. So you've got a power plant, it's operating, and you have no water. Sorry, during construction. The county lacks substantial evidence to support its assessment of groundwater impacts. The county has failed to identify an alternative water source and any environmental impacts from supplying water to the project from that alternative water source as required by CEQA. There's a specific case. It's a Supreme Court case, Vineyard Area Citizens for Responsible Growth, which specifically requires evaluation of environmental impacts from the alternative water source. For all of these reasons, we urge the county to uphold our appeal, to direct staff to revise the supplemental EIR, to adequately evaluate and mitigate significant impacts to vernal pool fairy shrimp, to protected avian species, and to groundwater. Unless the county does this, its approval of the supplemental EIR and the project will violate CEQA. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else representing the appellant? You may come up.
Good afternoon. My name is Donald Mooney. I'm an attorney. I'm here on behalf of the NGO appellants, Sierra Club, Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society, Center for Biological Diversity, and I think there's and Defenders of Wildlife. Sorry, Kim. And we submitted a letter today by email. I want to make sure that the board received that. If not, I have additional copies here today.
We did receive some copies right before the meeting. I'm not sure.
Yes, they would have been from my office. Thank you.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure they were received and part of the record. So here we are, environmental organizations, national environmental organizations, appealing an approval of a very large solar project, knowing the climate change problems that we have in this world and that we're facing, and the critical juncture we're probably at with regards to climate change. As you might imagine, that's a pretty difficult thing for these environmental organizations to come to the conclusion that a large solar project, that as the applicants indicated, would serve 68,000 households in California, to challenge it, and to have been challenging it now for 5 years. That's because these organizations feel so strongly about the land that's being impacted here, that just because you can build a 2,000 acre facility or a 2,500 acre facility, or just because you can build it here doesn't mean that this is the right place to build it. These groups and organizations work tirelessly advocating for renewable energy in California and throughout the United States. But we also have to take into consideration where we are siting these facilities and the species that we're going to impact on these facilities. So in terms of filing this appeal, it's no easy decision for these national organizations to challenge this project and to have been consistently challenging it. But that's because this land that is being impacted is so critical to the San Joaquin kit fox, so critical to the giant kangaroo rat and other species. And so we've had to come to this conclusion that we need to continue to fight this project, continue to oppose it, because there are better locations where you can generate the same amount of energy, generate the same amount of economic benefits to both in terms of jobs, direct and indirect, and in terms of the county's revenues. But we can't be doing it at the expense of the species that are already threatened and endangered. So I want to talk a little bit then now about kind of the legal aspect. I mean, that's how we got here. We have concerns about the EIR. We have concerns, continued concerns. Well, those are addressed in our earlier comment letters. They're addressed in our appeal. But what I want to talk about a little bit now, and also join in the previous appellant's comments, but I want to talk about the letter that I sent today. Because not only are we facing climate change, but in California we're also facing an unprecedented and historic drought. And the recent surveys, as of just within the last month or so, in this area, show, in the Panoche Valley area, show that the giant kangaroo rat, which is a keystone species, which is critical for the survival of the San Joaquin kit fox, its population in the last several years has declined by 95%, and partially because of, in large part because of the drought. These are studies that are, these are studies and analysis that have just been completed. We've attached that. We've attached that from William Bean's analysis, and the conclusions and the trapping show that they only trapped, that the trapping rate was 1.5% for 2015. They're barely finding the kangaroo rat out there. There's a Washington Post article that we also attached that talks about the precipitous decline of these species in this area, partly due to drought, and how it's also going to impact the San Joaquin kit fox. We know that Fish and Wildlife now has data about equally about the significant decline of San Joaquin kit fox in this area due to the drought and the impacts of the giant kangaroo rat. So how does this apply to this project? And what your review is here today. And council earlier got up and talked about the kind of the legal parameters in terms of CEQA and CEQA's requirements. And most of that I agree with in terms of how we characterize the law. But there's another aspect of CEQA is when is it time to do significant or to do supplemental environmental review or subsequent environmental review. And under CEQA, when you have significant new information that wasn't available at the time, that indicates that the impacts will be greater, more severe, or the mitigation measures will not be sufficient to mitigate the impacts. The agency has an obligation, a legal obligation under CEQA, to conduct further studies, to do that additional work. Now we're not talking about information that was available, you know, a year, 2 years ago, where we could have come up and argued. We're talking about information that is just recently available. Information that was not available to us at the time, was not available to the county at the time or the county's consultants. But this huge decline in the kangaroo rat's population. And under CEQA, under Public Resources Code 21166, and as well as the Napa Valley or Napa Citizens case that's cited in my comment letter, that requires, it mandates that before you certify this EIR, that you go back and at least do the analysis based upon this significant new information associated with the historic drought. I mean, we have the species, the kangaroo cat, or the kangaroo rat, and the kit fox that are the populations are declining far more dramatically than anyone thought. And this being the critical core habitat area for those species, especially for the kit fox. So under the law, you are obligated to conduct further studies, further analysis, and make that determination of whether or not additional environmental review, additional mitigation measures need to be addressed and implemented because of the significant new information. All of the other stuff that we've raised in our papers, the other appellants council has raised, but I'll leave it at that because to me, this new information makes it very clear of what the county's obligation is here. Thank you.
Thank you. And counsel, you said there were two appellants, and those represent both?
Right, so I believe Mr. Mooney represents the Sierra Club and the Audubon Society, and I believe the former speaker represented the Citizens for Concern to Save Panoche Valley. So I believe both appellants have addressed the board.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
I also represent Defenders. I mean, I'm here on behalf of Defenders and Center for Biological Diversity. It was all one. That was all one appeal.
Okay, and there are four of
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mooney. Okay. Now we will proceed with public comment, and anybody that wants to address the board at this time will have 3 minutes to do so. So if you could, do we have any speaker cards? First speaker I have is Jennifer Lee.
Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Lee, and I'm speaking as a resident. I'm here to support this project. My husband is a union electrician. Having a project with 500 construction jobs in our backyard would mean he would finally get a chance to participate in our life. He could do baseball games with me. He doesn't have to commute. He's currently working out of state. So having a project like this would not only impact me, but 499 other families just like me. The revenue, we are constantly reassessing our decision to stay in Hollister. Our restaurants, businesses are all struggling. Having this direct revenue will make us feel like we're a part of the Bay Area. We get to show our kids that experience of diversity and different types of opportunities. And the environmental impacts. I've been here 34 years. I've never been out to Panoche Valley to look at these animals. So hearing that, you know, I don't relate that to our community. What I relate is the revenue, having the taxes, having our roadways fixed, having the education fixed, not the environmental impacts. And my fear is that this project continues to get delayed and San Bernardino County won't see these benefits. They're going to move this project to another county. We have this opportunity to have the money in our county. I'd like it to stay here. That's all.
Thank you. Next speaker, Marty Richmond.
Marty Richard from Hollister. As you know, I support this project, but there was a veritable parade of people coming up at the Planning Commission meeting when this was approved who said exactly the same thing. We don't oppose solar projects. We're solar, you know, we're solar, pro-solar. The truth of the matter is, I looked it up when I got home because it didn't comport with my memory, is the environmental groups have opposed these solar projects all over the state. They've opposed ours. They opposed the one in Monterey County under the exact same word-for-word arguments. This one in San Luis Obispo County, the word-for-word arguments, the same ones in every desert location in Southern California where they try to put a solar project, the same arguments word for word, basically saying the following. If you have an environmental problem that moves like a kit fox or a blunt-nosed lizard, you'll never get a project because they will move every day and you will be forced to reevaluate them every day. So it is not true. In fact, environmental groups, the same exact groups, were bragging that in Monterey County, they forced the solar project to mitigate 5-to-1 because the solar project in Monterey only offered 3-to-1. Here in San Benito, they're going to get 10-to-1 and they won't accept it. I don't know why they picked us up for the sucker punch, but this is ridiculous. It's true. I don't care as much about the blunt-nosed lizard as I do about the people in San Benito County who don't have any work. It's true. The people who don't have any work, they're not environmentally protected. They can just live in poor conditions, 3 families to a house, and nobody cares. Certainly the environmentalists don't care. They sued last week, a month ago, they sued to close Hetchy Reservoir, which is the water source for 2.5 million people in San Francisco. And they don't care what the result is as long as the animals make out. Well, I've got my priorities straight. I don't need to read this report to understand what's going on here. This is a stall job trying to send this thing into a tailspin so that the clock runs out. That's the only purpose of this appeal. I hope you'll reject it because common sense should rule at some time in our operations. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Marty.
Next speaker is Manuel Pinero.
Good afternoon. Manny Pinero, I represent Operating Engineers Local 3. Madam Chairwoman, members of the board, thank you for letting me speak. I'll be brief. I have a printout here. We're one of the largest construction locals in the United States. We represent the interests of people who build and protect our communities, such as San Benito County. Most of our members are heavy equipment operators and construction workers. We also represent public employees, maintenance workers for the state, and police officers and county sheriffs. I want to thank you for your support of Panoche Valley, the solar project. It's imperative that it gets built. Renewable energy is for the future of our children and grandchildren. And we got to think of that, especially old timer that I'm coming up to be. It's going to create great green collar jobs. And operating engineers, we have one of the greatest training programs for apprentices, for future workers in this county and journey people. Further, we appeal to project opponents not further delay this project via the legal disputes and other tactics. Our members, our community, our region, San Benito County, and the state, nation supports local development of renewable energy. For future opportunities because of this success, Panoche Valley Solar Project, we thank you for your support and we encourage that this project goes on for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pinero.
David Boy.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Barrios, and members of the board. I'm David Huboy from Huboy Architecture here in Hollister. I want to begin by thanking the Save Panoche Valley organization and the environmental groups who have raised the bar when it comes to preserving endangered species and that is impacted by development. I, for one, believe in the intricate balance of nature and the relationship of development and ecology. Certainly, it is important to maintain an equilibrium of sustain and harmony when considering the built environment and habitat. And that is why we have environmental review in place. If this project was to be built on brownfields, for example, it would be another matter. But in this case, the applicant has gone through the process in good faith, has made concessions, and although the mitigation measures may not be perfect, respect for the experts in the field, such as H.T. Harvey, of biology that assess impacts and formulate the detailed responses is warranted. As I view the larger picture of long-range impact to habitat and environment based on habitual reliance to fossil fuels, to do nothing or to impede or delay this project, to delay an avenue to embrace renewable energy is an adverse impact that is worth mentioning. We are at a crossroad where we have a choice to maintain our status quo or embark in a bold direction as part of a new energy reality, a reality that we need to change for the betterment of our community and the world in general. Working together and exchanging ideas, we can move forward. It is time for San Benito County to step up and take leadership as ambassadors for renewable energy and move this project forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Havoy.
Next speaker is Brett Monaco.
Madam Chair and board members, I'm not going to belabor you with a long dissertation on why I support this project. I've had a long history with this project. I can only tell you that the benefits far outweigh any perceived risks that may be out there. And I base this on a lot of research that I did personally on this project. It is time to move forward with this project, not to delay it any longer. And with that, I urge you to support this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Reb?
Next speaker, Bob Tiffany.
Good afternoon, Bob Tiffany. I'm here as a resident, longtime business owner, also as part of the San Benito County Business Council. I won't belabor the points. There's been a lot of great points already made. Let's face it, this is about as good as it gets for San Benito County. I mean, this is a solar project, renewable energy. This is exactly the kind of project that is good for the country, for the state, and certainly good for our county. As Marty pointed out and others, we badly need a project of this kind. I find it really ironic that we have all of these outside people coming from the Bay Area where the economy is booming, and they come down here and they continue to try to tell our county what is good for us. And they talk about put it somewhere else. Well, somewhere else will not impact our economy. We badly need the jobs. We badly need the revenue. So it's time for this project to move forward, and I respectfully ask that you deny the appeal and move this forward at long last. And I respectfully ask that the out-of-towners finally admit defeat and move on to the next battle. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Chris Kahn.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and members of the board. My name is Chris Kahn, President of Joint Venture Monterey Bay and co-founder of Brand Monterey Bay. I serve on the Project Development Advisory Committee for that is evaluating community choice aggregation for our region. Also, I sit on the steering committee for the Monterey Bay Regional Climate Action Compact. And I'm also a member of the San Benito County Chambers Green Committee. I join hundreds of community members and sustainability leaders throughout the region, such as Congressmember Sam Farr, the Sustainability Academy, Monterey Bay Community Power, and the Chamber of Commerce, in support of Panoche Valley project for the positive benefits to our community and our economy and our environment. On a regional level, this project goes a long way towards achieving the goal of generating renewable energy equivalent to our use of energy throughout the region. The project also will result in 110,000 acres, or approximately 175 square miles, of conservation lands, providing wildlife corridors, cohesive ecosystem management and preservation for the benefit of the many species and habitat areas in the region. I want to thank you and your staff for your leadership and commitment to working with all stakeholders, the state and federal authorities, to ensure that the permits are secured and construction commences in time to meet with federal tax credit deadlines. I join fellow supporters of the Panoche Valley Solar Project in appealing to the opponents not to sue the county or delay the project further. The environmental impact report, mitigation, and conservation plans are sound, thorough, incredibly extensive, and have already withstood legal challenges. It is a good project for our community, for our economy, and for our environment. I'm much more concerned about the climate impact on our endangered species than the impact that this project would have. Thank you again for your vote in support of this project and acknowledging its benefits long into the future.
Thank you.
Daniel Dodge Jr. or Sr.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Board of Supervisors. My name is Daniel Dodge. I'm a field representative in the office of Assembly Member Luisa Alejo. I have submitted to the clerk a letter that was addressed to Assembly Member Alejo as the chairperson of the Latino the California can I try that again? California Latino Legislative Caucus. And this letter was sent to Governor Brown. It's dated April 9th. We wanted to be able to read it in the record today. I will cut out a couple of paragraphs in the interest of time. I know that you're very busy today. This letter is the Latino Legislative Caucus support for the Panoche Valley Solar Project. Skipping the first paragraph, I'll move into the second one. The Latino Caucus recently reviewed the economic and environmental benefits and the cost of the Panoche Valley Solar Project. The $650 million, 247 megawatt solar project will create 500 direct green constructive jobs and over 1,000 indirect green jobs. The county is approximately 56% Latino, and their employment rate is consistently higher than the state and national average. If properly permitted and constructed in time for the federal investment tax credit, the project will result in an estimated $500 million in taxpayer savings throughout lower power prices. I'll skip now to the third paragraph. The project will also generate $400 million in local sales tax and special fee revenues for San Bernardino County at a time when the county is reducing services. To put this in perspective, the tax and fee revenues expected to be generated by the project are greater than the San Bernardino County's annual general fund. Skipping down to the fifth paragraph. In fact, due to the project's location adjacent to large tracts of other federally owned land, the projects and its accompanying mitigation lands will be a significant net benefit for the regional recovery efforts for several species such as the San Joaquin kit fox, the giant kangaroo rat, and the blunt-nosed leopard lizard. The project facilitates an approach which avoids segmenting habitat in a checkerboard fashion and allows for large coordinated efforts to manage and license public and private roads. In closing, I'll skip to the seventh paragraph, the last paragraph. Your efforts to promote renewable energy has been a great success, helping our state become a leader in the field and creating billions of dollars of investment in many communities. But these benefits have not reached many members of the Latino community. The project will help us recidify this by allowing more communities to benefit from renewable energy policies. Your administration and the caucus will be moving forward in the years to come. We urge you to direct the California Environmental Project Agency and the Department of Fish and Wildlife to ensure that projects' permit applications are properly expeditiously deemed complete and processed to final assurance well before the statutory determined deadlines. This is a letter that was dated April 9th. It was addressed to the Honorable Governor Brown. The Latino Legislative Caucus is made up of representatives, elected officials in both the Assembly and the State Senate, and we wanted to be able to put that and our support for the project into the record. Thank you for giving me a little extra time.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge.
Next speaker is Cesar Flores.
Good afternoon, members of the board, Madam Chairman. My name is Cesar Flores, and I'm the president of LULAC, or the League of United Latin American Citizens, Chapter 2890, Council 2890. At our monthly meeting of LULAC in March, our membership voted unanimously to support the proposed Panoche Valley Solar Project. The jobs, training, environmental health, education, and economic empowerment and opportunities will bring to our community. Moving the project to a different location, which is not in San Benito County, is not an option. We support policies that provide security and empowerment to Latino families and all families in San Benito County, improving our standard of living, which we support the Panoche Valley Solar Project, and respectfully request that you deny the appeal today. We also appeal to the opponents of the project not to sue our county, cause further delays, and kill this project that will benefit our county on so many levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flores.
Larry Ronenberg.
Thank you, all board members. My name is Larry Ronneberg, and I represent Mercy Hot Springs. We're a mile from the county line, and I think I'm probably the first person that's up here that, other than the environmental groups, that are pretty much in denial or want this project not to happen. There are some things that, as projects move forward throughout the state and different counties, that you learn new things that you didn't know a few years ago or maybe just coming out. For example, 2 solar projects that are now complete had 28 people get sick from valley fever. Valley fever is on an uprise, and if any of you have had it or know anybody who's had it, you know how debilitating it can be. Valley fever is a fungus. It's in the ground, and when you disturb the ground, even just from blowing wind, you breathe it in, and it can just decimate your body. It goes into your lungs and finds a place to grow, and you find yourself where you can't even walk 150 feet without needing a breath of air. You need to rest. My wife has had it. She was misdiagnosed with lung cancer. And after a year and being on diflucan of an antifungal, she was pretty much better. She now has it again. And we live just a few miles from where this project's going to be. I actually called the CDC this morning, and they don't actually even have a test available, and yet this fungus is on the same level as anthrax. And in all the studies that have been done, very little has been shown other than wear a mask, which doesn't help because it's in the microorganism level. And you look at the different projects that are being done, more and more information is coming out as to you need to assess the potential impact on workers and anybody passing through. You find people who have gone to Arizona and they were just at an airport. They get home and then maybe they're somewhere on the East Coast, and next thing you know, they're sick. And it has exactly the same symptoms as cancer does, lung cancer. I have information that I will submit that I ask that you read. There's so much more on the internet's available. There's actually groups called Survivors of Valley Fever, and you will learn that if nothing else, there should be a lot more work done on, if this project moves forward, on how to protect the people who are involved with the project at the project site. On to another subject. The CHP that was talked to here in San Benito County and Los Banos, I ask, why Los Banos? They're in Merced County. We're in Fresno County. We are on the road where all the traffic's going to be. And even the EIR says that the road is not adequate for that. Let me submit this information. And real quick, like how the government put tens of thousands of people at risk for deadly disease. Official study, Valley Fever outbreak at solar power projects, and there's one more there.
Maybe
Thank
could
you.
wrap up. Thank you so
Sure.
much.
Next speaker is Rob Bernowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Supervisors. How many hurdles are you going to allow to be put in front of helping other species about to become extinct? Those species are the private sector, middle-class worker, and the entrepreneur. How many of the environmentalists who came here today live here? I mean, the attorney who spoke on behalf of some of them didn't even know who the groups were that he was representing. He has no real interest in this project, and neither do his clients. We as a county elected Governor Brown, who has been championing renewable energy. He signed the bills that created the demand and the incentives to create this project. Now it is time for all of us to man up and approve the project because it is the will of the people of this county. Eve changed the environment when she took the apple from the tree. We wouldn't be here without Eve. The building of each home that everyone in this room lives in changed and changes the environment every single day. I do go by the project site frequently on my way to the 5 to visit my children going to school in Southern California. It is big, it is wide, it is beautiful. This project will not change that. One thing that will be changing, though, the population of the San Benito County will be decreasing by 3. My children have vowed not to return to San Benito County when they are done with their studies. Why? There's no jobs for them here. Think about that. People going to college and getting jobs that are relevant to today's economy, there are no jobs for them here in San Benito County, or not enough to bring as many that are attending college back here where they're going to be productive. I am not suggesting that we change the look and feel of this great county, but doing some things incrementally allows us to sustain what we do have. We need private sector jobs that will generate revenues that will allow for the improvement of roads, schools, and other things in the basket full of services that we do get from the government. And finally, I just want to add, I texted State Senator Anthony Cannella while I was sitting back there and asked if I could inform you that he does support this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Next speaker is Damon Felice.
Good afternoon. My name is Damon Felice. I'm here as a resident, local business owner, and a business council member, very similar to Bob Tiffany there. I can't believe it's 5 years later. I was here 5 years ago, spoke on behalf of the project in favor of it, and I cannot believe 5 years later we're doing this again. Very little has changed in that time. The one thing that has changed is there's more mitigation land, surprisingly enough, now than there was then. What I said then was the economic benefits of the project. As someone in the construction industry, what a great impact this would be for the construction industry, not just for short term, but for long term. We talk about green collar jobs and the training that people will get and be able to continue to go elsewhere and work or be able to maintain this project for the next 25 years. You know, I've heard a lot of mights and could be's, and I'm going to scare you with all these things from the people from out of town about all these things that are going to scare you and why you shouldn't do this. And I mean, this can be locked up in courts. They can forever and ever and ever. And what's going to happen is those federal incentives that the owners are going to get, they're going to go away, and the project's going to go away. Is that really what we need for San Benito County as a long time, as a fourth generation to this county? I get tired of the out-of-towners coming into our community, or my community, and all your community, and 95% of the people in this room's community, and telling us how bad it is and don't do it, and then they leave our community, and then our community suffers and fails. And I sure hope that you guys hear that from the number of people here, that it is a positive project, and hope we can move forward with this project. Thank you.
Next speaker is Shawnee. Not sure of the last name.
Good afternoon. I'm Shani Kleinhaus with Santa Clara Valley Audubon Society. We are one of the appellants. and sustainability is important to us. The importance to us also is to sustain the endangered species and biodiversity as people develop their own sustainability framework. And so to us, Panoche Valley is a globally significant important bird area. It was designated that way by BirdLife International and the National Audubon Society. It is an area that we do not see as replaceable, and it is critical. The EIR removed some of the protections that you previously found to be feasible. Those were important to us, even as they were, and we thought the EIR is flawed, as did the wildlife agencies. We don't see those removals of those protections as something that we could potentially support. And the drought changed the picture. Those endangered species are even more endangered now than they were before. And the fact that some of the other areas that were developed in solar have had those species and impacted them makes this even more important. So there are a lot of mitigation lands proposed around the project, and in a way it sounds good, there's so much of it, but to us it looks like you're building up muscle and ripping the heart out. And when you do that, the body dies. These are mitigations that are all around the valley. You rip the heart out and they don't work, and we can see that coming. So unfortunately, we continue to oppose this project. We continue to wish there was somewhere in San Benito County that you could produce a good, viable project that is not consuming the most important bird area or critical wildlife habitat for endangered species. And I just have to say, there was an errata sheet today that included new data that I have not seen before. Didn't have time to look at it. I think you need to postpone any approval or certification of the EIR. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Keith Watering.
Hi, how are you? Thank you. My name's Keith Wandry, and I'm here. I've just been kind of watching this project and occur or not occur. And there's just, I think, you know, this is, you know, this project means a lot to this county. I obviously see that. And of course, it's a big corporation coming in, waving money. It's going to be the be-all, end-all, you know, save the county type of thing. And it's, you kind of have to ask yourself, why your county? Right? If this big company all of a sudden interested in your county, and I think it's because they can wave less money around here, and you depreciate it more than in other more expensive places. You know, I kind of question some things. You know, this you folks approved this, and then it got challenged, but then in that time period after its approval, all of a sudden there's 3 more errata that are shown up, and it's like, okay, so if this hadn't been challenged, that errata wouldn't shown up. Right? It didn't get printed, right, or whatever. So it kind of makes me wonder how, you know, thorough their reporting is. They have all these biologists and everybody that come and say, yes, yes, yes. Of course, they're all being paid by that person, right? Which you've got to kind of look at. If you got hired by them and you came up and said, no, this isn't good, they would not be here. You would not be hired. They would pay you and you'd be gone. So, you know, I agree with all the things, the economics down here and everything, and everybody wants improvement thing. I don't think it's necessary. I mean, 5 years from now, you know, check and see if all those things that you're being promised are there. Are your jobs, it's 500 jobs guaranteed for 18 months during the construction. Are they union jobs? Maybe, maybe not, right? There's all these promises that you're getting made. You just be real careful and do what's right. And you know, the other thing is, you know, things evolve in areas, evolution, things evolve. Those animals have grown in that area. You know, we're going to set aside land over here. Well, they've evolved in this area that you're concentrating the thing on because that's the ideal area, right? You can't just take something and throw it in a different area. Oh, it has land. It's good to go. So, you know, you guys got a tough decision, and you know, that's why you get, you know, the jobs that you got. And but anyway. Good luck with everything, and we'll see how it goes.
Thank
Guys,
you,
take
Mr.
care.
Wandry.
Carlos
It's cold. My nose is cold. I couldn't either, thank you. But as the vice
Good
chair,
afternoon,
that
Board of
is your job.
Supervisors. My name is Carlos Vargas. I'm a local soccer coach. I've been in Hollister for 39 years. And through coaching soccer, I've been meeting so many people. I built a strong relationship with our community. There's Demis Feliz. I was his coach 30 years ago. Now he's a grown-up guy. And through the years, I met, I know so many people, especially, I wouldn't say especially, but the Hispanic community. And there's been so many people asking me, calling me, and ask me, the supervisors, what do they do for us? The city council, what do they do for us? And I explained to them, here's Joaquin Garcia, he called me about a couple of months ago. He lives on Fairview Road, and he got a problem with the water meter. And I told him, call one of our supervisors. I know Jaime, a long time ago when I have a question, I call Jaime all the time. But I told Joaquin to call, one of you guys, because that's your job to see for our community depending on your district. And that's, been talking to so many people in our town. A few months ago, I heard about this PVS project, and I believe in this project, of course. Why? Because it's going to bring a lot of jobs, good paying jobs, which is more important. I have 5 kids, and of course, they're already on their 20s, and 2 of them, they're unemployed, and of course, there's a great opportunity for 2 of my boys, to have a job in this project. Also, I would like to say thanks to John Pimentel that I met him already, to think about our county, to bring this project, this great project, to our county. Also, I've been asking so many questions about what's going on. And what I find out is that I believe that we don't need outsiders, I'm sorry to say that word, and tell us what to do. We need this project because we do not need baseless lawsuit. I just learned about, what that means. And believe me, that's awful. So that's something that I learned, something new that I learned, that way I can translate it or communicate to my community, to my Hispanic community. Baseless lawsuit. Well, we don't need that. Also, we don't need any more delays. Our community cannot wait. We are ready for good paying jobs, more business opportunities also. So please vote yes, supporting this project. Thank you.
Paul Ravella.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Barrios, gentlemen of the Board of Supervisors. My name is Paul Ravella. I'm a local business owner, resident, and the reason I'm here before you today, I also work for the project. The reason I'm here before you today is to ask that you take the same position you took 5 years ago, and that you join various members of the local community, elected representatives, such as United States Congressman Sam Farr, United States Congressman David Valadeo, California Assemblymember Luis Alejo, California Senator Canella, the 22 members of the California Latino Legislative Caucus, the San Benito County Deputy Sheriff's Association, the City of Hollister, Gavilan Junior College, the San Benito County Cattlemen's Association, one of the first supporters of this project, the San Benito County Farm Bureau, the San Benito County League of United Latin American Citizens number 2890, the San Benito County Business Council, the San Benito County Economic Development Corporation, the Community Foundation for San Benito County, the Central Coast Builders Association, the Conservation Fund, the Monterey Bay Community Power Organization, Joint Venture Monterey Bay, the California Women for Agriculture, the Monterey County Business Council, the people who have spoke before you here this afternoon, and more than 100 other community members and businesses that stand to be directly affected by this project. I ask that you join them in supporting this project and upholding the Planning Commission's approval from a couple of weeks ago. And again, I'll take this opportunity, I did this a couple of weeks ago. I invite those who have come in to San Benito County to be before you here today to leave a little bit of their pocketbooks in town before they drive back home to the Bay Area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
Next speaker is Joe Silvera.
Hello, I'm Joe Silvera. Born, raised, hay-fed. Actually, I'm a hay baler. A lot of people here that are opposing this probably don't even know what a hay baler is, but yet I know all of us do. Myself, I got deep roots here. My mom actually graduated grade school from Panoche in 1953, class of 1. My grandfather had 1,000 acres out there where this project's going to be taking place. So a lot of my childhood was raised out there as well, so I'm very familiar with the area. And myself, I'm a contractor, and for the last 3 years, I primarily worked on these solar farms down in Southern California as far as Tucson, Arizona. And it's been nice to see this project come in here, and I think it'll be beneficial for all of us here in this county. And it's just surprising the people that are opposing this, they have no stake at this. And I think we could be beneficial here. So I want to thank you for your time, and I think it's time to make some hay for us. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe.
Ray Friend.
Afternoon, Ray Friend from Hollister. A couple little points I wanted to bring up haven't been mentioned there today. In my previous life, I spent 43 years in the utility business, and I was a transmission supervisor for this area for a long time. My last job was I was the test supervisor that approved all these projects as they were inserted into our utility system. And I guarantee you of over 100 alternative energy sites that I approved, every one of them was opposed by the same group of people that tell everybody in the world they're for alternative energy, but that's only till they get their money, and then they turn around and say, not here. They want them to built in Arizona or someplace else. So they really don't have the benefit of San Benito County at heart. They really don't care about anything other than their narrow little vision of the environment and how they can protect it. The other part of it I wanted, that was brought up by Marty, that I think is a very important part, is California is not shrinking in population. California is growing in population. And I know for a fact that last year, Pacific Gas and Electric Company was within a few percentage points in their margin for energy of browning out sections of the state. We're talking about, because of the same people that are opposing this project, we cannot build any more power plants, coal, gas-fired, anything. There's not going to be any more hydro projects. So you're either going to buy your electricity from Canada, is where they're building a lot more, or you're going to have to depend on nuclear, and you all know that that's not going to happen. So I just want you to take the global view that we have to insert these solar plants, whether it's in Panoche Valley, whether it's over in the valley, and I guarantee you there's some huge plants over in the valley. All of these plants have got to contribute to our infrastructure, or we're not going to have any lights or computers or jobs. and it's not more than 5 years away. So I just want you to look at that when you think about it globally. I know there's a huge economic benefit to the county, obviously to the citizens of Hollister. I want to see more people go to work. And I understand there's only 500 jobs during construction, and it's probably a smaller group than that, maybe 50 people working at it full-time, maintaining and operating it. But the impact is still there. The tax revenue is still there. Whether there's only 50 people working out there, or they're still buying things, they're still selling power to the grid in San Benito County. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray.
Reed Sanders.
Good afternoon, Supervisors, Madam Chair. My name is Reed Sanders. I'm a San Benito County resident, and I'm here on behalf of State Senator Anthony Canella's office. I'm his district representative for the Salinas Field area. And I'm just here to officially state Senator Canella's support and approval for clean energy, and specifically the Pinoche Valley Solar Project. Thank you.
Thank you, Reed. I don't have any other speakers. Okay. I will ask anybody from the public, if you have not turned in a speaker card, you may at this time. And you still have the opportunity for the 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Sergio Sanchez. I'm a self-employed local business owner. I live in Salinas, spend a lot of time in San Benito County. I had the opportunity to work for many years. I used to be a union rep here for a number of years for county employees, but I continue to work and really be involved in this community. And one of the things that I had the opportunity and this previous years is to be able to employ people from this community, especially young people, and try to get them the best wage that they could get. And this last 4 projects that I worked in this area, I was fortunate to be able to get at least 50 people that were hired by different folks. And just like you could imagine, all of them are fully unemployed now because those projects are gone. Majority of young people, some with college degrees, some of them with lots of experience, lots of skills, and they live here in this community, and they have no jobs. And that is the sad part about it, because only one of those individuals was able to find them a permanent job, and she has to commute. She's a young woman from this community, and she now has to commute to Watson. It's a good thing, but now she's part of the commute and part of leaving her community to go do the work that she knows. She does that analysis, and she does a great job. She's a young graduate of UC Santa Cruz, and that's just one story of many that you all know. And that's why I'm here in support of this project, because I believe that the project has done more than any project. And I spent 10 years in city council, and I saw lots of projects, a lot of good projects, a lot of not so good projects. But this is one of the best I ever seen, with the contributions the project has made to the environment, to the community, the commitment that is made, that is almost going to be almost 100% union. The gentleman that asked about it, so it's going to be union. It's going to be almost 100% union jobs. And we know what that produces. That's not minimum wage. That's got benefits. That's got a whole bunch of stuff. But it keeps people like this young lady that I told you about from commuting from this community and being part of the community and contributing to the pollution by having to travel. She had to get herself a license. She had to get herself a car to be able to get a job in Watsonville. And so that's unfortunate. It's fortunate that she has a job, but it'd be great if she would stay here. Her entire family was employed as part of that project that I did. All of them are unemployed, including the mom. And they're all sisters, and they all have college degrees, and they're here, and they need in the job. And so when we talk about the folks that come out, the outside travelers, they really, the UC Davis, Sacramento, and all those guys that come from, they're sitting in the back, Assemblymember Alejo and Senator Canella gathered them and wanted to talk to all of them. It's why do you oppose this project, and can we compromise? And at the end of the day, after some discussion back and forth, they just said, we just don't like this project. We're never going to like it, and we're never going to support it. So not only are they unreasonable, they will not compromise, and they said that to two legislators, saying we will never compromise on this project because this is a special area for us. Well, it's a special area for us too, and that's why we need this project there. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Sergio.
Mayor Javi.
Good afternoon. My name is Nader Javid. I'm the owner of some businesses in Hollister, and I employ quite a bit of people, but I see we're losing a lot of jobs in Hollister. And I support this project 100%, and I hope you guys are going to approve it, and we stay in Hollister. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Javi.
Lupe Sanchez.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Lupe Sanchez. I'm a local businesswoman, and I urge you to please do not delay this project anymore. I was fortunate to have an opportunity to work in the city of Hollister last year and hired many young people who helped in this project that I had here. Everybody here in the community really needs the economy push here, and the students and young people that helped us in these projects were very eager to have something to work on. And I urge you to please do not delay this project any longer. These same people that we helped last year are currently right now unemployed and are looking elsewhere. And I feel for all the little animals that are extinct, but really, do you want the residents of Hollister to be extinct as well? I urge you to please push this project forward and stop listening to all these ridiculous allegations. Please move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez.
No more cards.
Okay, anybody else from the public at this time?
I promise I'll turn a card in after. My name is Jason Noble. I'm from Trespinos. First, I don't have a dog in this fight other than I'm a resident of this county. I've sat in this audience many times listening to applicants and opponents slugging it out as to why their project is worthy of your support or not. One thing that I observed today in listening was the amount of mitigation ground that is being, as an offset. I believe it's almost 10 to 1, if not more than that, which just seems to be a huge amount of land. I don't think you've ever had anything before you where they've offered so much offsetting land, and I find that to be a very highly contributing factor in your making your decision today. The other thing is that over time, and maybe I haven't watched this thing as close as I have from the beginning, but I've listened and read in the paper and I've observed that staff has studied the snot out of it, and they've come back with mitigation that the applicant has agreed to. And obviously, anytime you have someone applying for entitlements, somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. They're not going to be happy. I applaud the people that are against it only for the fact that they're convicted to their cause. But they had their day in court, and they lost. And they're back before you again trying to stop something that I did serve on the General Plan Advisory Committee, and one of the underlying themes that we wish to promote, and this project might actually pass before the general plan gets adopted, but one of the underlying themes was what's best for San Benito County. And I think you have a project before you today that supports that, and I would hope you would make a decision to have it move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Anyone else from the public? Okay, then what we'll do at this time is that I will invite, first of all, the applicant for a rebuttal, and they will get 5 minutes, and then one representative from the appellant. They will also get 5 minutes. Jason?
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a couple points that I wanted to mention in rebuttal. As far as the vernal pool ferry shrimp, so protocol level surveys were conducted of all the vernal pools, and they were done within 5 years of publication of the draft and final EIR, so it was appropriate for the EIR to rely upon those protocol level surveys, which they did. And those surveys showed that there were 2 pools adjacent to each other that where the presence of vernal pool ferry shrimp were observed, and those have been actually carved out of the revised project footprint, so they're no longer part of the revised project site. They're part of the Valley Land Conservation Area. So just wanted to point that out. In terms of the avian conservation plan that was mentioned, so this plan is something that's required under one of the mitigation measures in the EIR. The applicant prepared a draft plan, and that was what the appellant was commenting on. But it's important to note that that draft plan, it hasn't been vetted yet with the United States Fish and Wildlife Service and/or the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And we fully expect, their call is to protect, wildlife species, and the likelihood that they're going to approve any kind of conservation plan that's going to significantly impact avian species is pretty remote, at least in my experiences. And as far as, again, there was criticisms that you heard about the adequacy of the groundwater impacts analysis, and I'll just point out that the project hydrogeologists disagree with those conclusions with the appellant's assessment. Not only Jim Finnegan, who you heard from earlier today from Kleinfelder, but also Aspen had a consulting hydrogeologist as part of, basically not on their staff, but a consulting hydrogeologist to evaluate the information. They concurred with the analysis in the EIR, as well as Geologica, who was the original consulting hydrogeologist that actually did the analysis and the studies that Jim Finnegan had commented on and said are appropriate and adequate. What else? Just a couple other quick points, and then I'm going to have Randy McCormick come up. You heard a little bit about potential drought impacts on giant kangaroo rat. That was something that the attorney for the environmental organizations brought up, so Randy's going to address that. But I just wanted to point out in terms of potential impacts on biological species of this project. So if you review the project description of the EIR, the project's going to permanently disturb 1,888 acres. 2,500 acres is going to be fenced in, but the actual permanent disturbance area is about 1,888 acres. So to mitigate for those impacts, the project's setting aside a 2,500 acre conservation area in the valley, in the valley floor. That includes a giant kangaroo rat corridor that was actually expanded since 2010 in consultation with some of the agencies. And if you look at one of the figures in the final SEIR, it's figure C6-2, it's a great figure because it provides an inventory of all the sensitive biological species that are on this site. And you can see that the most dense populations of these species, giant kangaroo rat, blunt-nosed leopard lizard, are all located within these valley floor conservation land area. So really this project has backed off of all these, the most highly sensitive suitable habitat areas for these species to protect them. And then in addition to that, they are going to conserve in perpetuity an additional 22,000 acres of off-site conservation lands that are actually contiguous with the valley floor to allow species to wander around the valley. And then in terms of the valley fever comment that you heard, this is something that Aspen was very careful with and analyzed in the draft or in the final supplemental EIR. And there's a whole discussion about valley fever in the SEIR. And there's also a mitigation measure, HZ-7.2, that deals with this issue, and it talks about the types of protections that are going to be implemented to protect construction workers from valley fever. And there's also, just so you know, there's a discussion in the EIR that summarizes some of the Title VIII California regulatory requirements that, they impose certain obligations on construction contractors working in these kinds of areas to ensure that their workers are safe, from valley fever. So with that, I just wanted to bring up Randy McCormick so she can just share a couple thoughts on the impact of drought on giant kangaroo rat. I think what you'll hear from her is that this is a small snapshot in time in terms of the impacts on this species, and it's not real indicative. This is kind of a natural cycle that California goes through in terms of drought and weather patterns. But I'll let her talk about that.
Just a real brief moment. The length of time that the study that's cited in the letter that you received today was a very short snapshot in time, and giant kangaroo rat is an arid land adapted species. They do undergo large fluctuations in their population, and the record that was provided with the EIR information does reflect that fluctuations are expected, and that's one of the reasons that large landscape level set-asides are necessary for the species. The large land provides a lot of room for the species to undergo those fluctuations and then have protected areas that would support populations as they increase again. So the set-asides for this project are significant set aside for that species and would accommodate those fluctuations in population.
And I have a question for you, Randy. During construction, will there be biologists on site?
Yes.
As the construction?
Biological monitoring is required, and then all the individual giant kangaroo rats that are found on the site will be relocated to a nearby off-site location. There's a relocation plan that's required by the state and federal agencies.
Okay, and will the employees be trained in what to look for, what to see, what to do in the event that they see any?
Yes, yes.
Sign of the endangered?
Employees will have an orientation that includes photographs, typical burrows for giant kangaroo rats and the other species as well that might occur there. And then they'll be instructed that there should be biological monitors close enough that they'll be instructed to inform a biological monitor, and then there's procedures for protecting those species.
Thank you. We have another question.
So are you seeing the population decline of the kangaroo rat due to the drought?
Oh, yes. It's an expected, the population fluctuations for the species are expected, and they have been recorded in the past.
And so it's not just the Panoche Valley, it's wherever?
No, it's occurred in other portions of its range as well. Increases in the populations might vary a little bit just based on local microclimate differences because they're seed dependent, and so requires a little bit of rain.
Thank you, Randy. Okay, I think that is it for the applicant. And now I will invite the appellant to come up for their rebuttal. And you will have 5 minutes to do that.
Hello again, Rachel Klass on behalf of San Benito Residents for Responsible Development. Excuse me. I just want to make a few quick remarks in response to Council's points. First, on the vernal pool fairy shrimp. Council stated the protocol surveys were done within 5 years. Protocol surveys were done in 2009 and 2010, and they actually weren't full protocol surveys, which the Fish and Wildlife Service would require. And Fish and Wildlife Service has indicated with respect to this project and these studies that they would no longer accept them as valid. They would need to update those surveys. Also, with respect to the 2 identified pools in 2010 now being in the conservation area, as I mentioned earlier, it's well known that pools change locations, as do the species themselves. That's why it's imperative that new surveys be done now, 5 and 6 years after the original ones. That's too much time. Too much time has passed. We need to do new surveys. With respect to avian impacts, as council mentioned, the mitigation scheme in the EIR has not been vetted yet by Fish and Wildlife Service. And that's a big problem. That's our whole point. That's the adaptive management strategy and any triggers need to be established and evaluated now through the CEQA process. They need to be developed and circulated for public review and comment. That is the whole point of CEQA. And finally, with respect to groundwater, council said, their hydrogeologists just simply disagree with our analysis. But we're not talking about a question for an expert. This is a legal question. And the test and the law says you need to evaluate an alternative water source and any impacts associated with delivering that source to the project. It's not a question for an expert. It's not a battle of the experts. It is a legal test. And the EIR has failed that test. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And the last representative for the appellant.
Thank you. Donald Mooney again. Just 2 quick points. One on the fluctuation. I think the report that we provided you, in the Washington Post article talking to the biologist, indicate that the species decline has been 95%. That's in terms of unprecedented drought. That's more than just fluctuation. It's more than just mere reduction of rainfall or reduced rainfall. We have a species that is on the brink, 95% decline in the population over the last several years. If the drought continues, it's obviously going to get worse. That's not just a mere fluctuation. That's the species crashing. Two, with regards to the relocation of giant kangaroo rats, it also was a mitigation measure for the Carrizo project. And the biologists have informed us that that mitigation measure, that relocation, has essentially failed miserably with significant mortality of the relocated, of the giant kangaroo rats when they're relocated. So, and again, that is something it's information that's now available to you folks, and it's something that you should be looking into prior to certifying and approving this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the Board of Supervisors for a decision. And any other comments or questions you may have. So, Supervisor Rivas.
Be happy to go first, Madam Chair. I was not here in 2010 for the initial, the decision, but I've had a lot to think about. Obviously, had a lot to observe. I've talked to a lot of people, and it's telling that we're having this decision here today. I just read a news article a little afternoon that Governor Jerry Brown, he signed an agreement. Obviously, it's a non-legally a binding agreement from leaders from 11 other states and countries pledging cooperation to battle climate change. And of course, this non-legally binding agreement pledges and encourages pursuing more renewable energy in this state and in these other countries and these other states. And the reason I mention that is because this is a community that recently was divided over an initiative here, Measure J, that had to do with fracking and high-intensity oil extraction. And as you all know, or may not know, I was a big advocate for the initiative. I ran my mouth a few times, got some people to not like me. Oil companies and the lobbyists from Sacramento have certainly made it known that they weren't very inspired by my comments and my activity here in San Benito. But the reason I mention that is because, you know, on several occasions I got to speak to groups. I got to speak in front of people. You know, I got to go door to door to try to encourage people on why I thought we needed a ban. And on several occasions I said that future generations, especially my generation, that we needed to look beyond oil, that we needed to focus on alternatives. And so this project, you know, the opportunity that we get to vote today, it certainly is my opportunity to act. And it's my opportunity to put the words I said into action. And I see this as an opportunity for us as a Board of Supervisors to take this county one step into the future. You know, and I certainly, as an elected official for a county that I love, I've been here my entire life, I want my words to mean something. You know, if I'm going to stand against fracking and advocate the fact that we need more renewable energy, you know, especially, you know, not only in this country or this state, but here in San Benito County, you know, I don't want to just say it. I want the opportunity to actually do it. And so having spent months advocating for renewable energy sources as a practical a solution to one day replace or at least reduce our reliance on fossil fuels, over the last few weeks I've come to realize that as a community we need to take advantage of solar energy. And we need to do our part, however big or small, to produce more clean energy and reduce carbon emissions as mandated by state law. I believe it was AB 32, or there's SB, you know, but I think primarily it's AB the 32, and now with this new agreement, it's probably going to turn into policy. We'll have something else soon. But this project certainly is a viable option, in my opinion, for generating clean electricity to meet our energy requirements, not only in San Benito, but in the state. And one of the main the benefits of renewable energy is that it generates significantly low carbon dioxide emissions, more so than the development of the fossil fuels. And thus, despite all the naysayers out there, it will help reduce global warming. And I do have to say that, this project isn't perfect, because no project ever is, especially here in San Benito County. But I certainly want to acknowledge the local residents out in the Panoche Valley. I've been out there. When I first ran for supervisor in 2010, I went out there and I saw that the impacts that this project would have on their lives, and it certainly is. It's going to have an impact on their quality of life. Before that, I want to apologize to them, but I stand by this project. I think it is a good project, and I'm ready to support it today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Rivas. Supervisor De La Cruz?
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. I remember, oh God, about 6-7 years ago, I met John, and I introduced myself to John, and John says, "Funny you say that because I'm actually trying to work on building a solar farm here in San Benito County," and I told him that one of my biggest P was that we need to get away from using too much oil, too much other stuff, and go solar. And the idea, John introduced me to the idea, and from that day on, I was very passionate and I supported, and every time there was an opportunity on the Board of Supervisors to support a project like that, I was a strong supporter. I even went as far in saying that we need to put items on the general plan that will compromise or reward developers that will build solar ideas on their projects. And I really want to thank our chairperson, Margie Barrios, for leading the charge on this project lately. We visited Sacramento. We talked to Luis Alejo, Anthony Canela, other members of the Sacramento area, and to some of the members of the environmental group. And it was a clear-cut decision at that time that there will be no compromise. However, the solar group said, "We're willing to work with you." They were actually giving 10-1 today, compared to Monterey, which had a 3-1, which eventually moved to a 5-1. That to me really led that we really want the solar project in this community. Sam Farr, Luis Alejo, operating engineer local number 3, Mandy, Luis, Carlos, Lulek, DSA, City Halls, Ray, San Benito County Women, Lulek, San Benito Business Council Chamber. All these members have something in common today. And I have something in common with these folks today. We want this project, and we will support this project, and I will support it, Madam Chair. And it's about time.
Thank you, Supervisor De La Cruz. Supervisor Botello.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank everybody that took the time out of their busy schedules today to testify and give their input to the Board of Supervisors. It's very valuable. And I was here in 2010 when the board approved this project. And at that time, I certainly took and made every effort I could talk to people that were be impacted, met with the Audubon Society of Santa Clara, and as one of the speakers mentioned, I asked them, what can I do to address some of their concerns as one supervisor in consideration of this project. And basically, it's a no project. That's the satisfaction. It's a no project position. And there's no compromising, no anything. And that just doesn't resonate with me. Just doesn't. And it's a sad commentary that we approved something in 2010, and we're sitting here trying to approve it again in 2015. 5 years has gone down the road. As some of the testimony from the solar folks noted, the amount of carbon emissions that this project will save is tremendous. And the environmental groups are the ones that are fighting this thing. And they've fought it for 5 years. How much carbon emissions have they allowed to occur in our environment that has affected this very species that they're trying to protect? Listening to the lawyers, they're paid big money to come down here. They would have us study and study and study till the sun doesn't come up again. And I think we're past that. I was very much in favor of this solar project back in 2010. I feel stronger about it today. And we're fortunate to have a project like this in our county. It's unprecedented effort in mitigating the environmental and habitat impacts. The benefits to this county in a way of habitat preservation, but also the creation of jobs and revenue cannot be overstated for us. So this project absolutely needs to go forward, not only for the benefit of San Bernardino County, but for the state and future generations of Californians. And I certainly hope that the environmental groups take this decision as our decision and quit this fight, and let's work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Patello. Supervisor Munzer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to start my comments off with saying the same thing as Supervisor Rivas, that I was not here when the decision was made in 2010. But actually, that's not true. Supervisor Monaco was sitting up here where I'm sitting, and I was sitting back there where he was sitting now. So I have followed this project since 2010. And my support for this project has been lukewarm over the 5 or 6 years. But we're here now looking at a project that has been approved by this board. The EIR has been challenged in court and stood up to that challenge. And now we're here to approve an EIR which shrinks the project down and attaches a transmission line upon basically existing poles that are already there. I don't understand, almost don't understand the reason for an EIR in the first place. But having said that, I feel I can support this. I feel I can support this EIR. I think the due diligence has been done. It is time for this project to move forward and hopefully be a substantial benefit to this county. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Supervisor Munzer. And I have to agree with the four of you, and I, too, will support the project. I've got a couple of things that I would like to say. First of all, I want to thank you. I want to thank the five of us. I want to thank former Supervisor Monaco, who's sitting in the audience. I want to thank Supervisor Lowe, who's not here with us today, but she sits on the Planning Commission. Thank you for having a vision, and the strength to be able to go through a process of this magnitude. It has been huge. It's been a difficult process. But it has some very important results, as all of you have heard. PBS, every aspect of this project has gone through a considerable amount of study, as you have presented and as you well know. No rock has been left unturned. We have ensured that every living species is protected, including the human race, by providing them with jobs that not only protect them while they work, because I know there's mitigation to protect them so that they are not injured, they are not, don't get a disease or any kind of infection. So they're protected to the fullest extent. It will put food on their table. They will be able to afford medical care. It'll put a roof over their heads, and it gives them the opportunity for a greater quality of life. Who can deny that? That is something that is what we're here for as supervisors, is try to improve the quality of life for the residents in this county. So I commend you, Board of Supervisors and former supervisors, for not only doing it right, but doing the right thing. My second statement is to the groups that have fought us every step of the way. I urge you to let us, San Bernardino County, bring this project to fruition. Our community, the courts, our staff, the developer, and these 5 supervisors and the 2 former have found a balance to protect endangered species while providing a means for human beings to survive as well. We need the jobs, we need the economic benefits, we need green energy, we need an environment that can survive our changing world. Please help us instead of hindering us. So thank you all for being here today. I look forward for this project to move forward. So now we will make a decision, and I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
as a member of the Hollister High School class of 1984 and a hay baler, I make a motion to deny the appeals filed on behalf of the appellate and uphold the decision of the Plan Commission as follow. Adopt resolution certifying the final supplemental environmental impact report and adopting findings of fact mitigation monitoring and reporting program and statement of overriding considerations of the revised Panocha Valley Solar Project attached 1-2 staff report and adopt resolution denying the appeals and upholding the Plan Commission decision.
Okay, that is a motion
Second.
and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No opposition. 5-0. Okay, I will entertain now a motion to adjourn our
Second.
meeting. Motion and a second. Our meeting is now adjourned. Thank you, everybody.